This is a sewing tutorial of how to finish a bias binding with no visible stitching. There's many ways of doing bias binding, and often you see this line of stitching left over, which doesn't always look that pretty. Open up your bias binding and pin right sides together along your raw edge and sew a line of stitching along the crease with your sewing machine. Then fold the bias binding with wrong sides together up and over around the edge. Then you'll use your iron and press along that stitched line as tight as possible so it's nice and flat, ready to roll the bias binding over onto the other side. Now, working on the right side of your fabric, we're going to roll down the bias binding so the wrong side is on the right side. You want the fold of the bias binding just to slightly cover that stitch line so it's not visible on the inside. Then using your iron just to press down the bias binding to keep the folds nice and flat and pin into place. Then you want to grab a needle and thread and stitch along this line. I use a slip stitch because it's just a very nice stitch to use, but the aim is that you don't see the stitching, and that is how you sew bias binding to a raw edge without seeing your line of stitching.